I work in the evaluation team at the International Development Research Center. And for this last session of today, I'm going to invite you to engage in an ongoing evaluation process that's happening within the Safe and Inclusive Cities program. Now, I know what you're thinking. Are you kidding me? It's 5 o'clock and you want to talk about whether inputs translate to outputs and, log frame indicators. I promise you that is not what we're going to be talking about. That's not the focus of this evaluation. The Safe and Inclusive Cities evaluation, like all evaluation at IDRC, is about getting to results. It's about understanding the research, learning about what's working and what's not, and how we can improve future work. Specifically, the SAIC evaluation is providing insights and guidance to determine the results of the program and the potential future contributions. This evaluation has been designed to be specifically useful to the co-funding partners, to DFID and to IDRC, but it's also meant to be useful to the broader SAIC community, for those working, supporting, and using research for development to reduce violence in urban settings. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Eric Arbital, who is conducting the evaluation with his team at Universalia Management Group in Canada. Eric is a senior consultant at the head of Universalia's Environment, Security, and Conflict Transformation practice. He is an environmental governance, sustainability, conflict transformation, and evaluation practitioner, theorist, and innovator with more than 20 years of experience. He's working with Dr. Lucia Demer, an urban violence and public security expert, and Esther Rouleau, evaluation expert. So this is a presentation of preliminary findings. So I encourage you to engage, to respond, and to consider how we can elevate the findings coming out of this evaluation for more broader influence in the community. We want this to be interactive. Eric is going to pause in moments of his presentation so we can get some response from you. And I hope you will all think about that. So
I'm here today to share some of the insights from our preliminary findings around the evaluation of the Safe and Inclusive Cities program. A couple of things. I will share the objectives of our assignment. It's an independent evaluation. The bottom one? That's great. Okay, so there's an accountability and a learning dimension to this evaluation, and we're looking at the program and we're looking at the project. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is also because, moving beyond simply the accountability process, this evaluation and this discussion that, the presentation and a little bit of your elicited feedback through this process is really meant to get everybody to think about what a program like this is about, what are the strengths of a program like this, and how to think about research for development and further developing, in fact, research for development initiatives. We're all involved in the research for development field. We're doing the research. We have the programs. We're being funded by that work. We're engaging with it. We're presenting ourselves to the communities in which we're working as research for development practitioners. And so this process itself is a space for us to think about that. So I have, I've interviewed some of you. I've read some of the work that you've produced. I've, read through all of the reports that you've all generated and informed. And so this is a little bit of a kind of a feedback process that is, granted, given the time that we have, a fairly high level, right, look at the program. So, I don't go very much into the individual projects, although the individual projects have informed our perspective of the whole. And so, in fact, when we stop occasionally at times throughout this presentation to elicit your feedback, if you want to, share some of the insights, the ways in which this reflects or not some of your experience, if you, wish to share a particular sort of story narrative about the relevance, the effectiveness, your participation is, part of a network of researchers, et cetera, please feel free to enrich the presentation with your own very concrete experience. So the terms of our evaluation are to, as I was saying, to look at some of the evidence and look at the effectiveness of the program, the relevance, the research quality of the program, and the overall value for money as per DFID's value for money framework. We're also looking at a little progress since the midterm evaluation, and just a few things. This is it's a utilization-focused evaluation, so we understand that there are many users to this evaluation, as I was saying earlier, DFID being one of them, IDRC being another. It's a management document, and at the same time, it's part of the ongoing reflection around what makes for a strong research for development program. All right, so a couple of things, a few findings on the issue of relevance. So we spoke to lots of people at DFID and IDRC. We've read through the documents that have been produced as part of this program. We found that this program actually reflects some of the values and the priorities of both DFID and IDRC. In the context of this discussion, we thought that it would be interesting for us to particularly highlight some of the global, institutional, and regional priorities of DFID and IDRC. So the program was developed in the wake of the 2011 World Development Report, which really brought the focus to the urban agenda and issues of urban violence. I mean, the issue linking development and conflict, in fact, goes back arguably to the work of Ken Bush in the 1990s around peace and conflict impact assessment and the linkages between them. And a whole lot of work's been done over the last 20 years that have been exploring this, but the urban agenda in particular at the interface of violence and development was raised in that context. And this program really reflects some of the thinking around that. And also the organizations have a priority to fund and support research for development, to bring researchers into a kind of a user-oriented reflective space around generating this type of research that is of value, that is usable, and that also, and that also reflects the sort of the partnership spirit of a program like this. And we can talk about some of the partnership issues a bit later on. Finally, I did want to say that IDRC has a global remit to the work that IDRC does in funding this type of work. DFID has less and almost non-existent focus on Latin America, and it's very interesting to bring together two institutions like this so that there could be this cross-fertilization of experience between the priorities and the researchers who are doing this type of research in the Global South, bringing together a vast range of experience. Now this is really what I heard from so many of you around the relevance of a program like this, and this particular program, Safe and Inclusive Cities, for you all. So, we found that that all of you, the researchers who've been involved and supported by this program, appreciate the type of support that a program like this offers. In particular, the ability to advance a research agenda that is innovative at the interface of urban violence, poverty, and inequality. And that nexus in particular is something that you have developed now and really advanced. And this has allowed you to continue to advance the work in this field. Gender and Urban Infrastructure Insights. Now this is a program that is seen, when we look across the portfolio, a great deal of work, particularly looking at gender and infrastructure, and the insights there are very rich. And one area that you may consider doing research further into the future, whether through the support from DFID and IDRC or from other research for development funders, is around inequality and the way inequality plays through this. What we found is that in the urban violence, poverty, inequality nexus, the inequality dimension of this program was much less an area of focus within the research. Actually, in some of the presentations that I heard, it was interesting for me to see some of the comparative work that that has evolved and that's being done. But it really is sort of an area of where there's a whole lot of space for further research around the inequality dimension within the nexus. It's allowed you all to develop medium and long-term research projects, challenge global north-based theories, and carry out some comparative analysis, and also build a network of researchers. And I'll go into this a little bit later on around some of the issues of the network, so to speak. What we've found, in fact, is that this is a highly, if diversely innovative portfolio of projects. So we've looked at all of the projects and assessed them through the innovation related to the theoretical frameworks, the methodological approaches, and the theory policy orientations. So a very diverse portfolio on all of those levels. More specifically, new areas of research have been developed. Mainstream, theories have been tested in the global south. And so I think this was mentioned earlier on already, I reiterate it, with some counterintuitive results around social inclusion, belonging. Mixed methods have guided 14 of the projects, and innovative methods were implemented in challenging and risky contexts, and I think in quite innovative ways, appreciating the nuances of the dilemmas that are raised around ethical and methodological issues. I didn't know that the panel before me would be specifically about that. I think this speaks to that directly. Now, at a program level, I think it's interesting to recognize that what we often see here and elsewhere is that researchers get together and then the research presentations are made and there's a little bit of feedback to the panels and then we go on and we move from one situation like that to another. I'm quite happy to see that tomorrow there's a World Cafe, which is a different way of sharing and engaging with knowledge, practice, experience, and experience sharing and knowledge generation and knowledge sharing. A lot of the ways in which what we found that the gatherings have happened around this program have been in situations where there were missed opportunities to engage in other than typically academic ways, or where presentations were made and feedback was received. And so that's quite important, and I think for research for development programming, certainly into the future, and I'm also, as I say, I'm sort of pleased to see a World Cafe model being introduced into tomorrow's work, that developing appropriate methodologies for that type of engagement should be pursued. In terms of knowledge generation, so one of the areas that we're looking at is generating better understanding. Okay? Knowledge generation. So the Safe and Inclusive Cities program has surpassed its targets of producing knowledge products that identify key drivers of urban violence. The latest number, and every time I hear the number of how many knowledge products were generated, the number increases, so we're at 175 now and rising, and that's great. I mean, it far surpasses the targets that were established. We do see, however, that academic peer-reviewed papers are concentrated within a few of the projects. Now, academic papers are not the only way in which quality is assessed, but there is, there's clearly a few projects that are more academically oriented than others. 2/3 of the projects have produced working papers. Now, this is quite an interesting piece here. I do environmental peace building research when I'm not doing evaluation work, and I understand the value of working papers and how working papers often translate into more refined papers. It allows for engaging with a diversity of researchers and engaging in different networks and pursuing kind of deconstructing some of the discourses that you're working with, the communities of researchers, and some of those lead to policy papers, they lead to academic publications, so that's quite a good sign that that's underway. So I don't see those as less valuable, I just see those as part of a much longer trajectory of publication. The vast majority of projects have produced few, if any, policy briefs. I think this is also a missed opportunity to start thinking about the way in which your work is relevant and can reach folks like UNDP at global level, which we can talk about the program a little bit later on, but right now just at project level, that within your contexts, few policy briefs have been produced, and they're quite an easy way to introduce conversations and for relationships with policymakers, with people in communities to be produced. At program level, regional and thematic briefs have been produced, impact stories, 2 books are being finalized, and I'm quite, from our assessment that the synthesis, that the research synthesis currently underway can be expected to bring together program level results and insights, and it'll be interesting to see how that is generated. And the insights that generates that bring together so much of the work that you've all been doing. Just to continue on this issue of making program level research results widely accessible. So at a program level, there's quite a lot of work outreach work that has been pursued through international and regional conferences, through policy briefs. We see a whole series of new policy briefs that have just been produced, papers on gender and infrastructure and others. So that's sort of moving this forward at a whole variety of different levels. At project level, we see that researchers have variably reached out to policymakers, NGOs, and grassroots organizations. And this is actually the most interesting bit, is that a lot of the ways in which the research gets, if you will, into those policy circles or into working with NGOs and having policy and practice relevance is very much through your own relationships as researchers with some of the policymakers or with the NGOs or the civil society organizations in your communities, and also the experience that you have and the advocacy that you engage in as researchers. I do research and practice oriented work, and research for development is research and practice oriented research, not simply research that is, when I say simply, I mean that with the greatest respect, research that is disassociated to the policy and practice process. And so engaging more intentionally in the policy and practice process, I think, is a part of that. And I think some of you have faced some challenges around that. I think some of you have done it very effectively. I think some of you are looking for other ways to do that. And I think some of you may have other insights about this. And I really want to talk about this because it's an important conversation. So I welcome a few comments around making your research widely accessible. Some of the strengths around practices that you've pursued, challenges that you've had, insights that you wish to share with others. All 15 projects filled gaps in the field of violence, poverty, and inequality in different ways. The vast majority of high technical merit in their design. There's been notable variation among the teams, and that's also to be recognized, because when we talk about a portfolio, there is the recognizing the individual research projects, and that individual research projects meet all of the quality indicators. And then there's also the portfolio level, and wherever innovation is a part of a program, you can't expect that across the board all projects perform to the same level on the same issues. And I think it's important to recognize that in through an evaluation like this. The research results are still in the process of being published and shared, and of course it's still too early to be definitive as to the quality of all projects and the results that they've generated. So I just put a bémol, a caveat to some of the statements. And this is a project and a program level issue. If we're talking about research quality is not only about the research process, but there are a whole range of kind of research to publication to influence continuum, and I don't think the program has been all that clear in terms of articulating what quality measures associated with kind of policy uptake, programming uptake, and the sort of scaling up of that research has been about. And so that's not clear, and I think there needs to be some work around that in any future programming. And I think it's quite important for all research for development work to recognize that. Some of the factors that you have told us that you've had to confront, and that we've also looked at through some of the project approval documents, the completion reports, and in the middle of the monitoring reports, but some of the challenges: lack of good communication and collaborative strategies among some of the projects, right? And the research for development assumes that research funding is provided, and the teams will, mostly get on with doing the research. In fact, the collaborative practices and the intentionality around collaborative methodologies within research teams is seemingly undervalued. Here, I've seen this elsewhere, but this has been a challenge for many of you. The multiplicity of institutions in other cases. The evidence, of course, that institutional capacity has been low in some cases, and that's been related to the ability of teams to be innovative. And this raises the question of capacity building. Earlier on, Dr. Caroline Moser brought up the issue around capacity and the transmission, if you will, of research capacity from one group to the younger group of researchers to other researchers. I think that's an important piece here. I think it needs to go beyond when we're talking about research for development. there are institutional obstacles to good research for development in some of the cases. And even though capacity building is less popular today than it was even just a few years ago, the strengthening of the institutions that are involved in the research for development is an important piece that allows for supporting the researchers within their contexts and also allowing for the sustainability of that work beyond the funding period of a particular program. The availability of data has been a challenge in some cases, particularly related to the political and security contexts. We've seen some of the projects revised down in terms of their ambitions with respect to the work that you've done. It's not a negative issue, it's simply looking at some of the constraints. Staff rotation on some of the projects has been an issue. Language, a little bit. On a handful of projects, and the POs identify this as a management challenge. The issue of research legitimacy. We found that 2/3 of the projects had a significant participatory design elements. I think all of them had to some extent, but 2/3 of them in particular, significantly participatory, though you weren't required to do that. You were certainly encouraged to do that. So that was a part of generating the research legitimacy of your work. You've all developed sound ethics protocols. And this is another piece in terms of the sustainability of the work and insights and the transmission to younger researchers, and also kind of part of building this community of practice is providing training on undertaking field work in challenging environments. This is an ongoing field of practice. It's been going on since far before I was trained in doing field work in conflict environments. And that was going back some 15 years. And the field of peace studies has done a whole lot of work on this. And so in terms of the work that you're doing, particularly with urban environments, particularly with methodologies and ethical issues, the book that you're publishing, the book chapter is important. There's a whole field of publications that could stem from this, from your collaborative work. Nearly all of the projects have integrated gender considerations into the research design or produced gender-specific or gender-sensitive results. Again, an important part of the legitimacy of the research. 3 of the projects we found have been gender intentional, 12 have been gender sensitive in their design or methodology. All the projects have in some way moved the discourse or reflected the important move in the discourse from women as victims to women as agents of transformation, key actors with respect to social inclusion, informal institutions, urban crime prevention, etc. Engaging masculinities. The work on masculinities is an important part of the ongoing research. Clearly, you know this. I'm simply reiterating the fact that some work was done on this in South Africa going back 15, 18 years, but again, it was very small communities of researchers that were doing this, and so the work that you've all done is an important contribution to the discourse. And since the midterm evaluation, there's actually been a bit of a move in some of the way in which you think about and report on your work from men, women, binary to a more integrative approach, more nuanced, more interesting, and more important. In terms of the research importance, the research users consider your work important. There's an ongoing recognition of your work as Global South researchers, the importance of South-South research, the importance of communities as focus and participant in research, and the fact that you're all generating data and insights that are valuable to the ongoing discourse. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump there, but I did. Positioning for use. Again, this takes us back to the discussion we were having earlier on, and I don't think there's any need for me to belabor the point around this. But at the program level, the communication strategy, I just want to say a few things. We recognize that, we note that the human and financial resources for outreach and communication were not budgeted at a program design level, despite the program's objectives of dissemination and policy reach. The communication strategy was adopted in 2014. Took a little while for it to get going, but it seems to be full throttle at the moment, and I think that's really important because the benefits of that will be seen through time. At a project level, again, we were discussing some of the mixed strategies, the challenges that some of you have faced. But again, I think it's in some ways premature to be definitive about the type and extent of outreach, because you're still working in some cases with some of your results. I do want to say a few things about the baseline study, and I'm mindful of some of the kind of limitations in time that I have here, and in keeping this discussion alive, there's so many themes that I would love for us all to be discussing. The baseline study served, you've all said to me, those of you that we've interviewed and spoken to, we've also read the baseline study and looked at it, that it served to orient the research teams in terms of the themes, in terms of bringing together the bodies of literature for this program. But it's more of a literature review than a baseline study. So it really focuses on the research end of the research for development kind of field. And of course that oriented this program to be more academic research oriented than research for development in some respects than would have been desirable. But the baseline study did that, and that was a part of its legacy. The other thing is that there's a bias towards northern-based theoretical framings and discussions, and it under-examines some important issues of issues that you are all confronting in the research that you are doing. I'm going to say a few words about the management and the governance of the program in the sort of 3.5, 2 plus 4, because I'm just going to stretch it out a little bit, minutes that I have, because we did start 7 minutes late. So in any case, but I do want to just invite 2 comments around some of the research quality issues, maybe the baseline study, and other insights around that perhaps you'd like to share to the last few slides and last few insights. Anyone would like to make a few comments about the research quality, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, maybe some words about the baseline study? Anyone like to speak to any of those issues? All right, I can smell dinner and sort of the break around the corner. So we're not going to go further into that discussion. But if you do, I encourage you to share some more spaces around that. I'm going to say a few words about efficiency in the 3.5 minutes that I have left, and I see that the program management team is standing there and pushing me along. So the SAIC program operated in a lean manner. Okay? On a variety of different levels. I think every effort was made to do work efficiently, to do work with economy, to ensure that every opportunity was taken to take advantage of wherever resources were spent, for there to be kind of a multiplicity of objectives being sought at this program. I'm already jumping a little bit to the issue of value for money, because I've been asked to look at the issue of value for money. So the program itself was short of human resources, and I think there were a whole lot of challenges that the program was facing. This was originally designed to support 5 or 6 projects. It went on to support 15 projects. There were adaptations along the way, at the level of the management team, at the level of some of the ways in which this unfolded. But there were a series of human resource related challenges. And I think also, this is important to mention, is that there's a key person dependency risk in this program, where having one person who really holds a lot of the institutional memory of a program is sort of managing a program like this, and mandated to think about the past, the present, and the future, if any, of a program like this. And so, as we think about research for development programming, it's important to take these things into consideration. You all had more or less equal budgets, but the projects that you were engaged in had different levels of challenges, different needs for program management, different team sizes, different methodologies, and there was a little bit of accommodation for that, but more, I think, might have been perhaps more effective. I already talked about the cost reduction measures, okay, and the strategic opportunities to ensure that the costs associated with this were limited wherever they could be. But I do want to make this point, is that across the program, And across the projects, pretty much every single person firmly believed that any reduction in the resources provided would likely have compromised the quality and depth of the research practices and the outputs. And that in fact, probably a whole lot of extra work has gone in there simply because of your commitment to these issues. The call for proposals process, you've all put in a huge amount of work into the call for proposals process. And I know that there are those thinking about ways to create and value a two-step process and how that may be a more effective way of managing a huge call such as this. But I do want to say that given that there were hundreds of responses, it does reflect the interest, the commitment, and the relevance of a program like this into the future. So, high value for money. IDRC and I'm going to stop now. IDRC and DFID pursued this through through an initiative that saw themselves being partnered, where the partnership-based relationship, I'm going to just jump to here, where the partnership-based relationship really sought to take advantage of the strengths of each one of those institutions. And I really just want to kind of leave you with that thought that partnerships are not necessarily, and this is a good example, partnerships among among organizations and institutions where everybody's contributing the same thing, but that those partnerships reflect a negotiation of the strengths and constraints of each of those partners. So drawing in even specific partners to do specific things to support the work that you're doing is a part of taking advantage of a program like this. And I think at program level, they certainly did this. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for all your insights and your participation. Good luck with your work.